In the summer of 1867, a small farming town near Sedalia, Missouri, was shaken by a strange and troubling medical case involving 8-year-old Timothy Caldwell. Dr. Samuel Harding, the only doctor in the area, wrote pages of notes about a boy whose actions puzzled everyone. To most people, Timothy seemed like a normal, polite kid with a friendly smile. But something about him felt off, and the medical knowledge of the time couldn't explain it. Over 6 months, 3 people died in odd accidents near Timothy, and many farm animals were found dead under mysterious circumstances. These weren't random events. Each person had some connection to the boy with pale blue eyes that never seemed to show true emotion. Local officials had the records for over a century, but Timothy's story reveals a chilling mystery about what a child might be capable of. The trouble began in a Missouri still healing from the Civil War. Sedalia's families had lost sons and husbands in battle, leaving behind struggling farms and broken hearts. The Caldwell farm, once a thriving place, sat in a quiet valley 15 miles from town. James and Martha Caldwell had big dreams of raising cattle and corn, but James died in the war, and Martha passed away from illness in 1865. Their son Thomas, only 21, took over the farm but couldn't keep it afloat when his brother William died in a prison camp. Leaving behind a widow and young Timothy, Thomas took the boy in, hoping he'd help with the farm work. Thomas and his wife, Sarah, weren't the warmest people. Hardened by loss and a tough life, they weren't ready to raise a quiet, pale boy like Timothy. When he arrived in 1866, he carried just a small bag and spoke little about his past. His parents were gone, and he'd stayed with neighbors for a while. Adults noticed his good manners. He always said yes, sir, and yes, ma'am, and never complained, even when working long hours. He seemed like the perfect child, but something about him felt strange. Dr. Harding met Timothy in June 1866 when the boy came to town with his uncle, a skilled doctor who had treated soldiers in the war. Harding could usually read people well, but Timothy made him uneasy. The boy was polite, answered questions clearly, and looked adults in the eye without fidgeting. Yet his intense stare felt almost too grown-up, as if he were studying the doctor just as closely. The small Sedalia community knew everyone's business, and neighbors started noticing odd things about Timothy. Ellen Patterson, whose farm was next to the Caldwells, saw him working in the fields with a focus unusual for a kid. He never played or rested, just kept going like a machine. She also noticed her chickens acting strangely whenever Timothy was near, flapping and squawking as if they sensed something wrong. Her husband brushed it off, but Ellen couldn't shake her uneasy feeling. The first tragedy struck in August 1866. 5-year-old Mary Fletcher, the cheerful daughter of the town's blacksmith, was found dead in Willow Creek, a shallow stream near the Caldwell farm. Timothy was the one who discovered her. He ran to the Fletcher family, pale and shaken, saying he'd found Mary not breathing. A search party rushed to the creek and found her face down in just 18 inches of water. Dr. Harding confirmed she had drowned, a sad but common accident for kids playing near streams back then. But Timothy's detailed story about finding her, describing exactly where she was, how her dress caught on a branch, and even the water's color, felt too precise for a scared child. He said he was looking for a lost calf, which his uncle confirmed, but the calf was found days later, far from the creek, safe and sound. The Fletchers thanked Timothy for alerting them quickly, but at Mary's funeral, Ellen Patterson noticed something chilling. While everyone cried, Timothy's face stayed calm, his dry eyes watching everything closely. 3 weeks later, another death shook the town. Henrik Larsson, an old Norwegian logger, was found dead at the bottom of Devil's Bluff, a rocky spot near the creek where Mary died. Henrik often checked beehives there, but this time, Timothy spotted his hat caught on a bush and found the body. He said he called out but got no answer, so he climbed down to check. Dr. Harding determined Henrik's neck was broken from a fall, likely dying instantly. Once again, Timothy was at the heart of a grim discovery, leaving the town wondering what was happening around this quiet, polite boy. The scene at Devil's Bluff, where Henrik Larsson was found dead, had one puzzling detail. Several dead bees were scattered around his body, far more than you'd expect so far from a hive. Samuel Patterson, a neighbor, told Dr. Harding that Henrik knew those bluffs better than anyone. He'd climbed them for years without a single misstep, so a fall seemed unlikely. When asked, Timothy suggested Henrik might have been stung by bees, causing him to lose his balance. He mentioned how bees get upset when disturbed, maybe swarming Henrik and confusing him. Dr. Harding thought this made sense, but something didn't add up. The dead bees were all clumped right around Henrik's body, not spread out as you'd expect if he disturbed a hive up top and fell. When Harding checked the beehives at the bluff's top, they looked normal, no signs of a recent disturbance, with bees calmly collecting nectar from late summer flowers. The third death erased any doubts about mere chance. In September 1866, 6-year-old Jacob Mills disappeared while playing in the woods near his family's cabin. For days later, his body was found in an old, hidden well half a mile from where he was last seen. Timothy had joined the search party, tirelessly combing the woods alongside grown men. He seemed to know the area better than most locals, guiding them through tricky paths with ease. When asked how he knew the woods so well, he said he often explored, collecting plants and herbs for his aunt's cooking and remedies. On the fourth day, just after dawn, Timothy showed up at the Mills cabin, exhausted, saying he'd found something. He led them to an old well covered by logs and thick brush, where Jacob was found barely alive, weak from dehydration and cold. Dr. Harding rushed to help, but Jacob passed away hours after being pulled out, his small body too frail to recover. Dr. Harding wrote in his journal that Timothy's ability to find such a hidden well raised serious questions. How did an 8-year-old know the woods so well? What else might he know about? Even more unsettling was Timothy's behavior as Jacob lay dying. While the Mills family gathered around their son, Timothy sat quietly in a corner, seemingly praying. But Harding, watching closely, noticed something chilling. Timothy wasn't praying. His lips moved, but his eyes were locked on Jacob, studying every detail of the boy's fading life, his shallow breaths, pale skin, and slipping consciousness. When Jacob died, Timothy's face showed no sadness, only a strange look Harding could only call satisfaction. After the funeral, Harding visited the well where Jacob was found. The sight felt off. The well was so well hidden by logs and brush that it would have been nearly impossible to spot. Timothy claimed he heard crying, but the well's depth and cover made that hard to believe. Looking closer, Harding noticed something the rescue team had missed in their rush. The logs and branches around the well were arranged too neatly, almost like someone had placed them on purpose to hide the spot. The thought was too grim to say out loud, but Harding began to suspect Jacob hadn't just fallen in. Someone might have put him there and covered it up until he was too weak to survive. That night, Harding started keeping detailed notes on Timothy. If his suspicions were right, the boy could be a danger to everyone. But he had no proof, only hunches. Timothy seemed like the perfect child. He went to church with his aunt and uncle, sat quietly through sermons, and worked hard on the farm, doing tasks that would tire out grown men. He was always polite, respectful, and had a reasonable explanation for being near each tragedy. He was looking for a calf when he found Mary Fletcher, walking home when he saw Henrik's hat, and helping search for Jacob like any good neighbor would. But Harding's years treating soldiers taught him to spot something darker in people, a coldness, a lack of normal feelings, or too much interest in others' pain. Timothy showed all these signs, but in the body of a young boy. In October 1866, Harding began quietly investigating. As the town's doctor, he visited farms to check on families, but really, he was learning more about Timothy. What he found was troubling. Animals on nearby farms were dying in strange ways, not from sickness, but from odd injuries. Chickens were found with cleanly broken necks, with no signs of foxes or other predators. Pigs had mysterious cuts that got infected, leading to their death. Horses suddenly went lame, forcing farmers to put them down. Ellen Patterson told Harding she'd lost 17 chickens in 2 months, always 1 or 2 at a time, found in the morning with their necks snapped. She thought it was too neat for foxes, as there were no other signs of an attack. When Harding examined the dead chickens, he saw the breaks were precise, done with a skill that showed someone knew exactly how to target their necks. The deaths of farm animals near the Caldwell property weren't random. They showed a careful, controlled pattern, not the messy work of predators. James Wickham lost 3 calves to bizarre accidents, ropes tangled around their necks, or heads stuck in fences in ways that didn't make sense. Robert Dunham's strong, steady bull broke its leg in a ditch, despite being one of the surest-footed animals around. All these farms were close to the Caldwells, and neighbors often saw Timothy nearby around the time of these incidents. James Wickham mentioned to Dr. Harding that he'd seen Timothy walking along his fence the morning before a calf died. It seemed odd, him being so far from home, but he was polite, waving and calling out like a well-mannered kid, Wickham said. During his regular checkups at the Caldwell farm, Dr. Harding started watching Timothy closely. The boy was always there, quietly observing while Harding treated his aunt and uncle for common farm-related aches. But Timothy's interest in the exam stood out. He asked questions about the body and medical procedures that seemed too advanced for an 8-year-old. Once he casually asked, "How do you know if someone's really dead?" "Sometimes they just look asleep." When Harding asked why he wanted to know, Timothy said he needed to be ready for emergencies since the farm was so far from town. It sounded reasonable, but the boy's calm, almost scientific curiosity about death felt unsettling. He asked about how long dying takes, what signs to look for, and whether people could survive certain injuries, like a medical student studying a body. Harding tested Timothy by sharing false medical facts, like saying certain injuries were deadly when they weren't. Timothy never corrected him, but seemed to memorize every word. Even more chilling was how Timothy reacted to Harding's stories about treating wounded soldiers. While most kids would be upset or sad, Timothy listened eagerly, asking about wounds, blood loss, and survival odds. "Did they scream when you cut off their arms, or were they too hurt to make noise?" he asked once, his pale blue eyes locked on Harding's face. The polite question sent a shiver through the doctor. By November 1866, Harding's journals were nearly full of notes about Timothy. They painted a picture of a boy with an adult's grasp of violence and death, but no trace of normal human feelings. Still, notes weren't proof, and Harding needed solid evidence to protect the town from what he feared was a dangerous child. His chance came when Thomas Caldwell hurt his back during the harvest, needing bed rest and daily visits. This gave Harding more time at the farm to talk with Timothy and dig deeper into his thoughts. What he learned was worse than he imagined. Through careful questions and observation, Harding discovered Timothy had been experimenting on animals for months, maybe years. The boy mentioned a cave where he wanted to think alone. When Harding visited it, he found a horrifying collection: animal bones, makeshift tools made from farm equipment, and detailed drawings of torture experiments. The sketches, drawn with a skill surprising for a child, showed rabbits, squirrels, birds, and larger animals in various stages of pain and death. Each had notes in Timothy's neat handwriting, describing how the animals reacted, how long they lived, and what caused the most suffering. One note next to a rabbit sketch read, "Stayed awake for about 10 minutes after losing eyes. Sounds faded slowly. Stopped moving after neck pressure." Harding realized the accidental animal deaths on nearby farms were Timothy testing his methods on bigger targets. The most terrifying find was a new set of drawings, not of animals, but of people. They showed children and adults in pain, with notes about human anatomy and ways to cause harm. One sketch clearly depicted Mary Fletcher, another Henrik Larson, and a third showed Jacob Mills in a well, with details about dehydration and exposure. Timothy hadn't just been nearby when these people died. He had planned and carried out their deaths with cold precision, documenting everything like a scientist. The horror in Sedalia was far from over. Harding faced a tough problem. The cave's evidence proved Timothy's guilt, but was found through an unauthorized search. In 1867, no one would believe an 8-year-old could be a calculated killer. People thought children were naturally innocent, only turned bad by trauma or poor upbringing. The idea of a child born without empathy or morals was unthinkable. If Harding shared his findings, he'd likely be dismissed as a doctor broken by years of war work. The evidence would be ignored. Timothy would be seen as a grieving orphan, and the deaths would continue. Instead, Harding decided to confront Timothy directly. During a visit to the Caldwell farm, he asked the boy to walk with him to check the livestock. Alone, Harding revealed what he found in the cave. Timothy's reaction wasn't what he expected. No shock, no denial, no fear. The boy listened calmly. nodding as if agreeing with Harding's account. When Harding finished, Timothy said, "You're not going to tell anyone." It wasn't a question or a plea, but a confident statement. "Why wouldn't I?" Harding asked, curious about the boy's reasoning. Timothy smiled, the first real emotion Harding had ever seen on his face, sending a chill through the doctor. "Because no one would believe you," Timothy said calmly, "and you're curious about what I'll do next." He was right. Dr. Harding knew his claims would sound like wild tales from a man losing his grip. Worse, he couldn't deny a small part of him was fascinated by this boy, possibly the most dangerous person he'd ever met. "How long have you been doing this?" Harding asked. "Since I was 5, Timothy replied plainly. "Maybe before. Started with bugs, then mice, then bigger animals. It's interesting how they react differently to the same harm. People, too. There were experiments. People understand what's happening to them, which makes it more interesting." A cold shiver ran through Harding. "What's next?" he asked. Timothy thought for a moment. "I want to see what happens when you hurt someone who trusts you completely, someone who'd never suspect you." The meaning was clear. Timothy planned to harm his aunt and uncle. Harding knew he had little time, maybe hours, before Timothy acted. The boy spoke with a bold confidence, sure he couldn't be stopped, and his past actions showed he moved quickly once he decided on a plan. That night, Harding visited Sheriff William Crawford, a practical man who'd fought bravely in the Civil War. Crawford trusted Harding's judgment and was open to hearing him out, no matter how strange the story. Harding laid out the facts carefully. The cave's drawings and notes, the pattern of deaths and animal losses near Timothy, and the boy's deep knowledge of anatomy and violence. Most urgently, he shared Timothy's plan to target his aunt and uncle. "Even if half of this is true," Crawford said, studying the disturbing sketches, "we can't arrest a kid on suspicions and drawings. But we can watch him and be ready if he tries anything." Together, they formed a plan. Harding would visit the Caldwell farm as usual, bringing medicine for Thomas's back pain, but using it to keep both Thomas and Sarah drowsy and safe from Timothy. Crawford and his trusted deputies, all steady former soldiers, would hide around the farm, close enough to act fast but out of sight. The next morning, Harding arrived at the farm and noticed an eerie quiet. The usual clucks of chickens and grunts of pigs were gone. Timothy stood in the doorway, his pale blue eyes watching Harding closely, almost like a predator. His sleeves were rolled up, and his hands looked freshly scrubbed, as if ready for something messy. "Good morning, Dr. Harding," Timothy said politely, but there was a new edge in his voice, a hidden excitement. "I've been waiting for you." Inside, Harding found Thomas and Sarah in bed, seemingly asleep but with shallow breathing and pale, grayish skin. "What did you give them?" Harding asked, keeping his eyes on Thomas. "Just some herbs from the woods," Timothy answered, his tone light but calculated. "There are lots of useful plants around here." Harding checked their pulses, weak but steady. Whatever Timothy used, he'd measure it carefully to keep them helpless but alive, at least for now. "They won't wake up for hours," Timothy said casually. "Plenty of time for us to talk." What followed was unlike anything Harding had ever heard. Timothy spoke about his killings with the calm precision of a doctor discussing a routine procedure. He described his experiments on animals and people, detailing what he learned from each death. "Mary Fletcher showed me drowning takes longer than people think," he said, settling into a chair like they were having a friendly chat. "It's not quick. There's panic, struggling, and a pattern of breathing before they give up. I held her down for almost 3 minutes." Harding's blood ran cold. "You held her under?" Timothy nodded eagerly. "She was playing by the creek. I said, 'I found a pretty stone at the bottom.' When she leaned over, I pushed her head down. She was small, but she fought harder than I thought. People have stronger survival instincts than animals. Henrik Larson was trickier," Timothy continued. "He was too strong for me to overpower, so I got creative. I knew he checked his beehives every Thursday, so I loosened some stones on the bluff's edge the night before." Timothy continued, his eyes bright with excitement. "For Henrik, I gathered bees from one of his hives and put them in a cloth bag. When he climbed up to check the hives, I hid behind some rocks. I threw the bag at his face and shouted that a huge swarm was attacking him. He panicked, stepped back, and fell right where I'd loosened the stones. He died instantly, just as I planned. Timothy's voice grew animated as he spoke of Jacob Mills. Jacob was the most fascinating. I didn't want him to die quickly. I wanted to see what happens when someone fades slowly. I told him I found baby raccoons in the woods, and he followed me without a second thought. So worried about those imaginary animals. I helped him climb into the well, then covered it with logs and brush. For 4 days, I brought him just enough water to keep him alive, but too weak to recover. Dr. Harding realized Timothy wasn't just talking about past acts. He was revealing plans for the people in the house. What are you going to do to your aunt and uncle? Harding asked directly. Timothy's smile widened, the broadest Harding had ever seen. That's where you come in, Dr. Harding. My other experiments were with people who didn't know what was happening until it was too late. But you know exactly what I am and what I can do. That makes you perfect for a new kind of test. As he spoke, Timothy moved around the room, picking up a rope from the barn, a heavy candlestick from the mantel, and sharp kitchen tools, arranging them with care, like preparing for a procedure. I want to see what someone does when they know they're going to die, and try to save people they care about. Will you give yourself up to save Thomas and Sarah? Will you fight me, knowing I planned for that? Or will you run and leave them behind? Harding knew talking was over. Everyone in the house was in immediate danger. He pulled a pistol from his medical bag and pointed it at Timothy. Step away from the knives, he said firmly, his heart racing. Timothy looked at the gun with curiosity, not fear. That's a Navy Colt, right? I've seen them in war books. How many bullets does it hold? 6, Harding answered, instantly regretting it. And how many people are you protecting? Timothy asked. There's Uncle Thomas, Aunt Sarah, you, and the 3 officers outside. That's 6. Even if you shoot me, you're out of bullets. Timothy stepped closer, unafraid. You want to know how I got this way, don't you? Was I born like this, or did something make me this way? Are there others like me, and how do you spot them before they kill? Every word was true, and Timothy's ability to read and twist Harding's curiosity was as terrifying as his violence. The confrontation peaked as Timothy approached his sleeping uncle with the rope. Harding lunged to stop him, but Timothy moved fast, slashing Harding's arm with a kitchen knife. The fight was short but fierce. Timothy, though small, was quick and skilled, wielding the knife like someone who'd studied the body closely. Harding grabbed his wrist, forcing him to drop the knife, but Timothy pulled another blade from his clothes. The boy had hidden weapons all over the house. The noise drew Sheriff Crawford and his deputies, who burst through the back door. They found Harding wrestling with Timothy while Thomas and Sarah lay unconscious. Deputy Mitchell quickly restrained Timothy, and Harding caught his breath, checking on the couple. Timothy sat calmly in a corner, clothes torn and face bloodied, his pale blue eyes still sharp and cold. You can't prove anything, he said as the deputies tied him up. No one will believe a kid did all that. Crawford looked at him, torn between disgust and awe. Maybe not, but try to kill your family is enough to lock you up no matter your age. Timothy smiled, that same chilling expression. You won't hang me. I'm too young and too interesting. Someone will want to study me. Timothy was wrong about his fate, but right about proving his crimes. When Crawford presented the cave's evidence to prosecutors, they dismissed the drawings as a troubled child's way of coping with his parents' deaths. The string of deaths and accidents was called coincidence, tied to Timothy's habit of helping in emergencies. But the attack on his aunt and uncle, witnessed by 3 officers, couldn't be ignored. No one could deny an 8-year-old attacking his family with a knife showed something deeply wrong. In 1867, the law didn't know how to handle a violent child. Timothy was too young for adult charges, but too dangerous for an orphanage. His case puzzled Missouri's courts, drawing interest from legal and medical experts across the region. After weeks of debate and input from scholars as far as Boston and Philadelphia, a decision was made. Timothy would be sent to Missouri State Hospital for the insane in Fulton for study and treatment by top experts. No one was fully satisfied. Prosecutors wanted him tried as an adult, while his defenders argued a young child couldn't be responsible. Doctors disagreed on whether he could be helped or was too dangerous to ever change. Harding went with Timothy to the hospital, staying 3 months to document his behavior and help staff understand him. The resulting study was one of the first to explore antisocial behavior in children, though it wasn't published for decades. At the hospital, Timothy adapted quickly, learning to mimic emotions like sadness and gratitude. He cried convincingly about his crimes and thanked staff for their care, fooling some into thinking he was improving. But Harding saw through it. Timothy was studying people, learning to manipulate them better. He'd built a mental list of human emotions and could fake them perfectly, though he felt nothing himself. He mimics happiness to get what he wants and sadness to get help, but he's never felt either, Harding wrote. His reports also revealed Timothy's ongoing violent fantasies and plans of future. When Timothy thought he'd earned Dr. Harding's trust by acting interested in studying human behavior, he started sharing ideas for new experiments that made his past actions seem almost tame. He described detailed plans to test how people react to different kinds of mental and physical pain, showing a clever understanding of human feelings. Harding wrote privately that if Timothy grew up with more resources, he could become one of the most dangerous people in America. Timothy stayed at the Missouri State Hospital for 18 months. During that time, strange incidents happened that felt like his work. Several patients died in ways that looked like accidents or natural causes, but showed signs of careful planning when studied closely. 3 older patients, previously healthy, passed away from apparent heart failure after spending time with Timothy. 2 younger patients had serious injuries from what seemed like accidental falls, but both happened in areas where Timothy had been seen earlier that day. Some patients reported seeing Timothy standing by their beds at night, silently watching them sleep. Hospital staff also faced odd problems. Nurses who worked with Timothy had vivid nightmares about violence and death. 2 attendants asked to move to other wards, feeling constantly watched, even when Timothy was supposed to be locked in his room. Dr. Martha Fitzgerald, a specialist brought in to help treat Timothy, found a secret journal he'd been keeping. Timothy had convinced a nurse to give him paper and a pencil for writing exercises, saying it would help him process his feelings. The journal seemed to match his story, filled with childlike entries about his thoughts, regrets, and hopes for getting better. It painted him as a troubled but fixable kid. But Dr. Fitzgerald, trained in European mental health methods, spotted a hidden code in the writing. When she cracked it, the journal revealed Timothy's real plans. He wasn't sorry or trying to improve. He was studying the hospital, its staff, and its security, planning new ways to manipulate and harm people. One decoded entry read, "Day 47, Dr. Fitzgerald thinks my tears today were real. She's starting to trust me more. 3 more weeks of acting like this should let me get close enough to touch her during sessions." The journal's discovery led to tighter security and less contact with Timothy. But he adapted quickly, focusing on learning the hospital's routines and possible escape routes. In the summer of 1868, Timothy vanished from the hospital in a way no one could fully explain. The official report said he escaped during a transfer between buildings, despite being watched by multiple guards. Harding believed the escape was far more planned, the result of months of careful preparation. Evidence showed Timothy had been quietly manipulating staff, getting small favors like extra exercise time or reading materials. These small changes added up, creating openings for his escape. He studied the hospital and its people for a year and a half, Harding wrote in his final report. By the time he left, he knew their habits better than they did. His escape was a carefully crafted plan, not a desperate act. After Timothy's disappearance, Harding tracked reports of suspicious deaths and accidents across the Midwest. Many had signs of Timothy's methods: staged accidents, tortured animals, and a helpful, mature child nearby. Now older, Timothy could likely overpower adults and was smart enough to avoid past mistakes. His time at the hospital, combined with his sharp mind and lack of morals, made him a unique threat in American crime history. Harding spent the rest of his career following these cases, trying to understand what Timothy represented. His private journals, found after his death in 1891, filled hundreds of pages with possible Timothy sightings and thoughts on the nature of evil, questioning if some people are born without morals His work sparked debates about crime, child psychology, and mental health treatment for years. Timothy's ability to fool experts raised hard questions about trusting mental health assessments and assuming all children are naturally good. The Caldwell farm was abandoned after Thomas and Sarah recovered. They couldn't stay in a place where they'd unknowingly lived with a killer for nearly 2 years. The property was sold to developers in the 1890s, but locals avoided it for decades. Sheriff Crawford sealed the cave where Timothy conducted his experiments, but its grim history lingered in local stories, with some saying animals refused to graze nearby. Harding's journals were given to Missouri Historical Society in 1923 by his daughter, who believed their scientific value outweighed their dark content. They remain in the archives for researchers studying the roots of psychological understanding. Thomas and Sarah never spoke publicly about Timothy, living under new names, perhaps fearing he might return. Sarah passed away in 1889, Thomas in 1894, and they never had children. In his last journal entry, days before his death, Harding wrote, "For 24 years, I've tried to grasp what Timothy Caldwell was. I fear he wasn't a rare case, but a hint of what humans can become without the morals we assume are natural. If he's still alive, there's a man out there who knows human behavior better than any expert, can manipulate anyone with ease, and sees people only as test subjects. Timothy's story shows that evil can hide behind an innocent face, and our beliefs about childhood may be dangerously wrong."